Right. So, welcome everybody. Very good to see you. We're now, I think we're way into our fourth year. Um, anyway, so on various occasions, people have asked me, why don't we speak about morality and things like that, that instead of being so floating around in philosophy, etc. And so why haven't I done it? I don't really know, but that itself is a philosophical question. Wait a minute. Please mute whoever wants to talk to somebody else. Okay. So today I want to explore the philosophy of morals and ethics and their significance in our lives. It's a huge subject, and I can but touch on aspects that will widen with your perspectives and ideas, but I can only touch on points, and I will throw them out, and as usual you will catch them and do what you want with them. Sometimes they're little mines in minefields. Actually, they usually are. Anyway, it's not easy for me to do this because I have to separate my personal feelings and morals from conclusions arrived at from my independent point of view as a philosopher. They do not jibe, and that's hugely problematic for me anyway. Ethics and morals are easy and explainable and absolute if you're religious, or at least believe in God. God tells you what is right or wrong, what is moral and what is not, i.e. evil. But, and here comes the but, it depends on which God you believe in, since each God has different instructions about what is right and what is wrong. And since your God is obviously right, your morals are right. And that is where ethics were born, I think. Well, my first question would be, are they an intricate part of humans? Are they absolute? Are morals right? Well, there is no absolute anything, or rather, absolutes are found within their frameworks. In the case of ethics, within our frameworks. When I think about it, morals and morality are behind everything that we discuss. We come with our own ethics and morals, which happen to be a sort of common denominator here. After all, we are part of and the products of Western society. This is our framework. Yet within our society, we each carry our morals and they are individual, but variations within the whole. Furthermore, it's debatable if we choose to be moral. In a brief summary of the thoughts on morality and ethics, I need to mention some of the people who've been at it for a long, long time to show you that we're not alone here. I can mention just in passing Aristotle, Kant, John Stuart Mill, and a few others. So Aristotle focused on virtue ethics, emphasizing the development of good character traits. He argued that individuals should strive for the means between extremes, avoiding excess and efficiency. Virtuous actions, according to Aristotle, lead to a flourishing and fulfilled life. We should not forget, by the way, that slavery was part of society. So their morals were great, except they had slaves. For today, that's for us not moral. For them, it was. Now, Kant, Immanuel Kant, which we'll mention a few times, was emphasized the importance of duty and moral principles. He introduced the categorical imperative, a universal moral law that people should follow. Kant argued that moral actions must be guided by reason, and the intent to follow a moral law irrespective of consequences. We'll get to that in a minute. John Stuart Mill was a utilitarian, advocating for actions that maximize overall happiness or pleasure. Mill's utilitarianism focused on the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Hobbes, known for his social contract theory, believed that morality is a social construct arising from the rational self-interest. There was Rousseau, which we'll mention a little later. Social contract, they emphasized the general will of the people as a foundation of legitimate government. He believed in the innate goodness of humans, suggesting that society corrupts individuals, leading to inequality and moral degradation. There's John Locke and Hume. Hume was an empiricist who questioned the rational basis of morality. He proposed that moral judgments are based on sentiment and emotions rather than reason, challenging the idea of deriving ought from is. These philosophers contributed diverse perspectives to the field of moral and ethical philosophy, shaping ongoing discussions and debates on the nature of morality and the principle guiding human conduct. So let us now get more onto us. Look, a few of us do mention the more human part that I haven't yet. That is caring about others. For example, Debbie and Fika, I don't think she's here today, and Morris, who triggered off my thoughts about today's meeting. I always enjoy the fact that they bring in a human, personal level to our theoretical discussions, morals, and perhaps caring about others. So let me say that I agree with you. In fact, I agree with you all. I know what I want morality to be. I personally feel that there are rights and wrongs. And I know that my point of view, my idea as to what is right and what is wrong is the best one. Obviously, we all do. Our morals are the best. But that is not the point of our discussion. Or perhaps it is. It is said that moral philosophy would like to, but cannot support a liberal, impartial morality built on genuinely objective values. Well, of course it can't. It can't because there is no impartial morality and there are no genuinely objective values. That's what we would like, and it's genuinely frustrating to realize that it doesn't exist. Because of time, which is change, there is nothing permanent in the world, and that includes morality and morals. There are no objective facts, including objective moral positions. I know that a lot of you won't like what I just said, but that's why I'm here. Kant did not go for this sort of thinking. His view was that ethics were autonomous. For Kant, moral actions are guided by reason and the inherent moral worth of the action itself. He proposed the idea of the categorical imperative, a universal moral law that individuals must follow regardless of the consequences. So killing is immoral. But what about self-defense? For Kant, there is no clash of morals. Let's look at this one. Someone will kill your family if you don't kill the attacker. What do you do? Let's say someone is shooting at your family but is surrounded by innocent people. Do you save your family? Saving the family would mean killing innocent people. This is an example, some sort of example of the trolley problem. There is no objectively right conclusion here. It's hard to accept Kant's view that ethics are a result of rationality, a universal rationality and reason. Hegel, I always mention Hegel because some of you love him. Ah, Fika, you are here. Welcome. I just mentioned you. I don't know if you heard it.
Thank you.
Hegel focuses on the end or purpose of ethical development. He emphasizes the evolution of ethical principles through history and social institutions. Individuals find their ethical entity within a larger social and historical context. My question is, if Kant's views on ethics is based on individual autonomy, universal principles, and the moral worth of individual actions, while Hegel focuses on the historical development and ethical principles within a social context and sees freedom as intertwined with communal life, could one say that Hegel's views are actually relativistic? He would certainly not say that, and nor would his fans. In short, if different social groups have different ethics, then ethics are not universally the same. Hegel did acknowledge the diversity of ethical practices across different historical and cultural settings. However, He believed that despite differences in concrete ethical norms, there is an overarching rationality guiding the evolution of ethical principles towards a higher form of freedom and self-realization. That is hugely problematic for me. There is a clash between universality, which is moral objectivism, and cultural diversity, i.e., moral relativism in ethics. There are many philosophers, apart from Kant, who have expressed views against moral relativism. I won't go through many of them, but I mentioned Thomas Nagel, who expressed skepticism towards moral relativism. He argues for an objective standpoint in ethics and discusses the idea that there are objective reasons for action that go beyond individual or cultural perspectives. I won't go into more, but you see how people stand and want to believe in objective morals. Morals are objective; they must be somewhere, and we just need to get them. But we talk about moral relativity. How can morality not be relative? How can an anthropologist believe in a real, true moral code? Look at the things they see in the world. Everybody having different morals, etc. There are cultural relativists. I won't go into a lot of them. David Hume's philosophy included elements of moral subjectivism, suggesting that moral values are based on sentiment and emotions rather than objective facts. Sartre emphasized individual freedom and responsibility. He argued that moral values are subjective and created by individuals through their choices. Let me go to a postmodern thinker, Michel Foucault, who explored how power structures influence and shape moral values. His work highlighted the relativity of moral norms and their connection to power dynamics. Now, how about us? How does one respond to immorality? There seems to be a sort of subconscious loose hierarchy, a framework of hierarchy of things we care about. Closest family, son, daughter, partner, close family, close friends, acquaintances, sports club, country, etc. We all belong to something. Now, what about a sports club? If a player is immoral, example, accused of rape, do we keep him on because he is pricelessly useful? Let me just mention something from English football, which most of you call soccer. In August 2023, Manchester United had to make a decision. Should their talented winger, Mason Greenwood, play for the club again? More importantly for our purposes, fans faced a choice too. Would they accept him back? He had been out of the team since his arrest on suspicion of rape, assault, and coercive control. He was later charged, but his charges were eventually dropped. Now, what should people do? This is an ethical problem for fans. What makes Greenwood's case striking is that fans are left with an ethical judgment. There was no conviction, and the charges were dropped, but the fans had seen what they thought was compelling evidence, and they would not have him back. The fans made an ethical choice. In American football, fans of the Cleveland Browns faced the prospect of cheering the accused Cyril Harrison Deshaun Watson. I'm not familiar with that, but that's what I found as well.
Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. Did I get that right?
Okay. Yeah.
Good. Pleased to hear it. I'm becoming more cultured with you lot. These examples raise a number of interesting and important philosophical issues, such as personal identity within a framework that one is part of, and whether one can remain neutral in certain situations. But is it possible to be neutral about what is going on around one? Does staying neutral not make a moral point? Is that not what happens if people see an injustice and say and think that this has nothing to do with me, we can withdraw from our club. But can we withdraw from one's family? What about one's country? Let's take an example. Germany in the 1930s and 1940s. Hitler got in through a democratic vote, after which the populace was silent about things that were happening all around them. Parks with signs that said dogs and Jews not allowed. Let me talk for a second about humanism and ethics. That has a human-centered focus. It is a philosophical and ethical stance that emphasizes the inherent dignity and worth of human beings. It places humans at the center of moral and intellectual concerns. Humanists believe in the origins of our moral capacities lie outside human beings and our evolution as social animals. They believe that when deciding how to act, we should use reason and empathy, considering the consequences of our actions and the likely impact on other people and animals. Humans believe in right and wrong. Indeed, they are passionate in their ethical commitments. This is a position of the possibility of a universal morality. Is the implication that people are basically good? Rousseau, for example, believed that humans are inherently good, compassionate and cooperative in their natural state. It is society and its institutions that corrupt individuals. A philosopher who had a more skeptical view of the innate goodness of humans was Thomas Hobbes, who had a pessimistic view, arguing that in the state of nature, humans are selfish and driven by desire for self-preservation. He believed a strong, centralized authority was necessary to prevent chaos. Okay, let us move on quickly. Like everything else, morals are necessarily approximate and fuzzy and historically temporary. We are always in a spot that is a balance from where we have come to where we are going. Now, let me try something on you. I mentioned three things in almost every talk. One is Einstein, one is AI, that's for Terry, and one is Hegel. Hegel I've mentioned, now comes Einstein. According to Einstein's special theory of relativity, there is no universal time. If you ask me what's this got to do with morals, it's coming. Hang on. If time is intrinsic in the world, that does not mean that it is universally simultaneous. According to the principle of time and relative simultaneity, two events that occur at the same time for one observer may not occur at the same time for another observer moving at a different speed. In other words, time is different and yet simultaneous as far as we're concerned. Using that as an analogy to morality, we could think of morality as simultaneous but relative, i.e. different. As with time, all observers' viewpoints are equally valid. So now depends on... So now depends...
Terry.
Who is... who is...
I don't know who that is.
The bomber's name is Harry on the screen, first screen.
Are you making comments to me or to yourself?
To you, Ron. There was a bomber. I think he left, though.
Oh, a bomber. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so as with time, all observers' viewpoints are equally valid. So now depends upon the observer. My now is not your now. Ethics depend upon the observer. My moral attitude is not your moral attitude. And that brings me to science, well, ethics in science. Science itself is a methodological... How are we doing with time? Not bad. Science itself is a methodological and empirical enterprise that aims to understand and explain the nature of the world through observation, experimentation, and the formation of testable hypotheses. The scientific method is supposedly not...
That was Jeffrey. Yeah,
It's the same person. He keeps
changed
changing his name. Now his name is Evan.
Yeah, throw the guy out.
Debbie,
Yeah.
Debbie, can you get rid of him?
I think he left.
Unless if he's Fika.
Or
Okay, never mind, never mind.
Yeah, I got rid of him. He's out.
We can see morals at work, folks. So there was one immoral person in our group, which is not bad when you consider the percentage. It's quite good. So it's rather naive to believe that research is not influenced by the person doing the research. The practice of science occurs within a broader social and ethical context. The scientific method itself is not neutral. The action of scientists, the application of scientific knowledge, and the impact of scientific research can have moral dimensions. Here are some issues. Using results of medical experiments on concentration camp inmates. Do we use the results of those experiments? There's the morality of using forced labor, for example, in the chain gangs. I'm running out of time, so I want to speak about, since Olga's here, art and ethics, and I can but mention one example of art serving as a tool for ethical reflection is the painting Guernica by Picasso, created in response to the bombing of the town of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War in 1937. This powerful and iconic artwork is often considered a potent commentary on the horrors of war and the moral consequences of violence. Literature is filled with ethics. There's To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee, Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky, The Kite Runner, Khaled Hosseini, Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck, 1984, of course, and the Diary of Anne Frank. All these talk about our ethics within literature. This brings me to a personal point. A huge problem I have with the notion of moral relativism, which allows for the idea that every instance of morals is right. There is no moral objectivity. Now, this is where my epistemological theories of relative and approximate knowledge have landed me. I didn't want to go there because I personally don't believe in that. But I have no choice. My research, all my thinking has got me to a point that that ethics and morals are relative, and that is quite a difficult thing to work out. Does that mean that every person's point of view, however bad it is, however bad their morals are, each one is okay, is correct for them? How do we face a thing like that? How do we do it? So I had to get myself out of the pit that I dug for myself, and I will expose this to you. The only way out is my theory of subjective objectivity that I mentioned to you last time, just to throw it out, which I'm still working on, by the way. So my contention is that each of us is subjectively objective. What do I mean by that? We are objective, but so is everybody else. That being so, everyone is, to me, subjective. I know they're not objective because I am. Only I can be objective. But to me, I know that they are subjective. I acknowledge that each one is for themselves, for their own perspective, objective. I know that. While really, i.e., to me, they are being subjective. I could call this acknowledgement of the other. Even if I disagree violently with them, they are there, and I have to acknowledge that they're there. I can argue them, I cannot pretend they're not there. That is how I have dug myself out of the pit that I actually went into with my eyes open, I suppose. Okay, so I'm gonna I'm going to open it to you. And I just want to conclude by saying that being a moral relativist is like playing a complicated game of hide and seek, or even finding a common ground is itself a game of hide and seek. So those with questions, you can deal with anything I have said or not said, and you can attack me. Remember that since I'm subjectively objective, I don't mind if you attack me.
Ron, before anybody talks, I think we need to get rid of the bomber who's in.
Yeah, but where?
Well, apparently they put up several posts and then they're dropping them as they get caught. The people that have not shown their faces, Josh has shown his, but like Ewer W, whatever it is, they need to show their faces or we need to drop them off now.
You're right. Jazz, can you show your face, please? Okay, in that case.
How about
happy to speak for myself? Hold on, Terry. I'm happy to speak for myself, but I'm not a bomber.
Wait a minute. No talking, please. Jazz, I'm pleased you did show your face. I was about to throw you out. I'm sorry. Lucky, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I was just doing the dishes. But I'm listening. It's very interesting.
Doing the dishes is a very moral act. I'm all for it. Now, Zio1, can you show a face or not? In that case, goodbye. Remove. Anybody else bombing here? I don't know how they got in, actually. That seems to be it. Anybody else wants to be immoral today? This is not the time to be immoral. This is really the wrong subject matter. George, how are you? Just seen you here. Haven't seen you for ages. Welcome back. Okay, everybody looks very moral and friendly, but I know Iwe's been on before. Okay, that's it.
Could everyone who's not talking mute? I'm getting a lot of feedback from, I know it's just a few people, but it would be helpful for me. I don't know if it's happening or to anyone else.
What's happening?
No, several people not muted. It's for example.
Okay, all those not talking continue not talking. Okay.
It's not just that they're not talking, it's that their microphone's on mute. I think the host can mute everyone.
I can mute everyone. I don't particularly like to. I'll see how it goes. Remember, this is a moral conversation. First one we've ever had. And
some people may not know that they're unmuted.
Some people may not know that they're not moral, you mean? Okay. Right. Moshe, you're in first. Go for it. Go for the jugular.
All right. I want to thank you for your introduction. I will also limit myself to one ad hominem. And that is, as usual, you come up to us and offer us a glass of water and then open a fire hose. Okay. The first thing that I want to say, or the second thing that I want to say, is that if you look historically, at least Western civilization, we find that morality is not scalable outside of a closed or semi-closed environment. It worked in Greece, in the polis, in the city-state, where people had the belief that not only were they individuals, but they were also part of the city-state, and they had a responsibility to it and to the morality that was in the city-state, whatever morality is. And it also worked in medieval Europe under the church, which was enforcing morality based upon the rule of God, and everyone was afraid of going to hell. But outside of that, it doesn't seem, when that dissolved, the morality started to break down. And in the polis, morality is just not scalable. You can't include a polis that has almost 8 billion people in it. So that leaves us with a thing that I think that you and I can agree upon, is that there are no moral facts. There's scientific facts and perceptual facts and phenomenological facts and mathematical facts, but there are no moral facts. So the stake that I'm going to put in the ground will be the following. It is first to accept our finite nature as human beings, that we exist finitely, and we might ask questions about an infinite world, but I think we go about that incorrectly. We start with the assumption of the infinite and then try to work backward, where we should really start with the finite nature of ourselves. And if we're going to be a productive, and I hate to use words like happy society, we need to do a number of things as individuals. We need to care. We need to have an individual goodwill. Even in Kant, Kant, says that, in the Foundations of Morals, that if you don't have a goodwill, there's not going to be any morality. And so the caring about other people and the goodwill, I think, are two things that are necessary in order for there to be anything close to a good society. I also think that there has to be personal integrity. And by personal integrity, if I think something is good and I see something going on that is not, I have to be strong enough to stand up to it and say, no, you've got to stop doing that, even though it might risk me, social or personal harm. My granddaughter was telling me the other day about some friend of hers who they'd gone up to see the teacher, and the friend had stolen the candy out of the candy jar, and my granddaughter made her give it back, insisting that she had done it, and made her do that. So you have to have personal integrity. The other thing is that any social aim that anybody makes has to be something that is going to enhance the general good. Now, the general good is going to be different in different situations. Clearly, Aristotle recognized this when he was talking about in the Nicomachean Ethics that we have to find the mean, but that there is no absolute mean. The mean is always relative to the individual situation that I'm in. Somebody ran through a red light, or some other particular thing, and I've got to find the mean in that particular situation and in all situations. And the general idea that the golden mean is what is followed doesn't mean that there's just one mean that applies to everybody. Everybody has to figure that out. And the general good, that I think that if we're going to start with that, and we're going to have a government that's going to be based upon the general good, the first thing that the government has to be concerned with is feeding and sheltering everybody and giving them the possibility for good health. So the stake that I'm putting in the ground here is that we have to begin with the attitude of our being finite. If we're going to have a successful life, a successful personal and social life, we have to begin with a goodwill and caring about others. We have to have personal integrity, and what is going to be done for the good of the, for the social good, has to be something that is going to be good is going to be a general good. And the first two general goods that I think that we should start with are feeding, sheltering, and providing health to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Moshe. That was not really short.
But you can. Well, I didn't have an egg timer, and you've never insisted upon an egg timer in the past.
You're right. You're right. I wanted to today, and I forgot, because you were Diana first, and you completely mixed me up. So, but anybody from now on, please speak shortly as possible. 5 minutes is not bad. 6 minutes is already getting a bit dodgy, but then you'll have plenty of time to talk later, because everybody wants to say something. I'm not surprised. Everybody wants to talk about morals. So thank you very much, Moshe. And Victor, welcome back.
Okay, so if we're going to model an ethics in some way, it would have to be based upon the other, but the other cannot simply be others and all human beings. It has to be all living things and the ecosphere. That would be the wider other. There is one of the main schools in ethics is consequentialism, but its weakness is that it overlooks the issue of intention. And yes, we all know the commonplace that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but I think there is value in one's intention, and the consequence of one's intention to a degree then measures the value of one's intention and one's method of enacting it. One has to have make a distinction, it seems to me, between the framework of ethics and the situation. The framework in Kant is an abstract in the various categorical, three iterations of the categorical imperative. The situation is the wider situation, legal, political, economic, that inescapably shapes our would-be ethics. So with Kant, Kant's relationship to the ethics of the situation, you could take a step down from Kant, from the would-be universal to the less than universal utilitarian ethic, which is either the greatest good or the greatest happiness of the greatest number, depending on one's reading. So what one have is, in Kant, simply an ideal model. It's an ideal model that can't be applied. No one could possibly attain to a Kantian ethics. What one is faced with, rather, is the uniqueness of the moment, of each moment, the uniqueness of one's own person, and the uniqueness of the configuration in the moment that should lead to a unique ethical response to it, okay? And that is as difficult to achieve as arriving at the Kantian universal. Okay, so of the Kantian universals, acting so that one's actions are sort of a reflection of a universal law, I think perhaps the more important one is the second iteration, which is to see each human being as an end in him or herself rather than a means to an end. Okay, I think that's the easiest way to distill it into something which is truly practical reason, which is truly has a practical application as opposed to the more abstract universals. So there's three, if you're facing the situation, right, in its uniqueness, there are three possibilities deriving from the timeliness of the situation, right? If there is time to reflect, then reason can be applied to one's ethical choice. If you're in between, the instant and a wider moment, you could apply reason and intuition at the same time. If you're in the instant, you have to make an impromptu decision that is intuitive, right? And as Pascal said, the heart knows reasons that reason knows not, and those have to be counterbalanced, especially in the instant, any notion of Kantian reason. So you have it seems to me in ethics, in our discussions of ethics, that we have this kind of evasive privatization of ethics. Virtue ethics, religion and its commandments, the narcissism of feel-good ethics in a world of extreme or even obscene inequality and unsustainability. So you have to place the microethics of each instant in the situation alongside, whenever possible, a wider social ethics. And the social ethics are essentially a politics, civility or politeness in a wider realm, that of the public, politicos, polites, polis, okay? So in that wider realm, it strikes me that for me, the model, the only model that we have that is both reasonable and democratic is an egalitarian social democracy, which is essentially based on a utilitarian ethic. But alongside that, You cannot have social democracy simply in the Nordic nations. You'd have to have an egalitarian internationalism, and we are further from that than we are from achieving social democracy, whether in the global north or elsewhere. That has to be accompanied by ecology and sustainability, because there's no sustainability to either a just or an unjust society without ecological sustainability. Another framework of the ethics is the law. But the law seems to me to be more often an instrument of what is unjust. So alongside the law, you have this unattained ideal of just laws. And then you have international law, in which we have many just laws, and they're never applied. So I would say that for the relationship between the individual and the wider public realm, the decision of decisions is the decision to go to war or to abide by the decision to go to war. Remain silent or indifferent, to acquiesce, to promote or contribute to the effort, to enlist, to participate as a draftee, or either more or less quietly oppose or more or less actively oppose the initiation of war. So to go along the entire spectrum from the microethics to the wider public ethics, in the microethics, the ill treatment of the other in the widest sense, perhaps, for instance, simply using the other as a means to an end rather than seeing him or her as an end in him or herself. So alongside ill treatment, you have violation, violence without the right of self-defense, and war without the right of self-defense, which is what we see in terms of international law in the Gaza war. So you have the issue of what are the gravest violations of our ethics: war crimes, crimes against humanity, collective punishment, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, which is the crime of crimes. We see all of this in Israel's war in Gaza. We've seen it in Myanmar. We've seen it in Rwanda. We've seen it in Syria. And there doesn't seem to be a response from the Western upholders of human rights and ethics to these crimes. So the last thing I wanted to say is in contradistinction to the way in which I'm describing my model of ethics, virtue ethics, which I did mention briefly as being part of this privatization of ethics. You did mention this. Virtue ethics occurred in Greece in a timocracy, the rule of landed wealth. That was an empire and a slave state in which women too are chattel, or little more than chattel. So for the individual to have kindness or compassion or courage, on behalf of what? Or the cardinal virtues on behalf of what? There has to be the microethics of the situation, and there has to be the wider public ethic leading towards a just society, a just distribution of the wealth.
Thank you very much, Victor. 5 minutes, everybody. Okay, 6 to James.
Thank you. Yeah, this was very exciting. I find the plethora of the urgent kind of like impetus to make speeches about one's personal moral world is so evident so far. But I do hope it slows down just a little bit, like you're saying. I do hope it falls under 5 minutes for the rest of the mankind that are assembled here. And in a way, I think hopefully we're a little bit representative of mankind. You mentioned Hegel, and Hegel's ideas about morality, I think, are relevant. I want to say a couple of things first, though, about objectivity. I think objectivity exists because we have objects in the world. So as long as there are objects, there's going to be objectivity in human rational thought. It's going to exist. I don't think there's any way for us to become perfect subjective humans. There's a little bit of that in I think in David Hume, but not so much Kant. And after that, and there's a little bit probably in Socrates, right? The idea that one determines the ethics or the morality through discussing it, and the fact that morality gets elevated in the thought of Socrates is very exciting to the Platonic, the Platoists among us. They seem to get very excited about that idea. The other thing I wanted to comment on was the idea that there's no moral facts. I think the reason that's kind of confusing for some people, I think, is that there's an infinity of moral facts. You can pick and choose your moral facts. You can impose your will on in terms of like forming a moral theory, and then you get to create a domain of moral facts that you want to emphasize. So I don't think there's any loss of moral facts that determines how we should think about morality. I think there's an infinity, as a matter of fact, of moral facts. Everything that happens falls under morality in a certain sense. So every event, so to speak. And then as far as like the idea of Hegel, right, that the spirit tends to determine our morality, or the Geist, that way people are headed, in other words, sort of determines our morality, and this gets worked out for Hegel. This gets worked out in the law. So, in other words, we have a law, and the law extends from the natural world. It begins to fall on us as humans, because we tend to mimic the natural world. So we try to create laws so that certain kinds of facts that we consider to be immoral can't happen. We don't want people to be killed unnecessarily. We don't want our lives to be too dangerous. We want our lives to be comfortable, in the way the Hobbit, is comfortable. We want things to work out for us in a comfortable way. That's why we create. That's why we emphasize certain moral facts over others. And when we emphasize some moral facts over others, what happens in society is that laws are created, and there begins to become an apparent ethics that sort of goes along with that society. And the ethics that we choose, we may actually be in contradiction with. In other words, we may not be perfect. So we will choose like a British ethics, and Hegel was in favor of. He thought that a kind of a democratic monarchy. He believed in democracy. He praised Great Britain, but he thought it was really important to have a monarch. So and this is so that you have something like a flag or a person that when you hear the name, you can cry about it. In other words, he wanted people to relate themselves to a principal person or idea of personal that they could relate to as a moral center, and that would be the king or queen, or it would be the American flag, perhaps a country without kings, things like that. So this is why people become patriotic. They sort of like emphasize their relationship with the country, or not. They could say, well, this country is hell because we're committing atrocities around the globe, and we shouldn't go along with it. And we fall into contradiction with the ethics or the spirit of our country. And so I don't think you can rule that out. That the spirit of a civilization may become antithetical to the moral conscience of the people that live within it. I don't think you can rule that out. And I think we're facing some of that now, especially in places like the United States, where the democracy is extremely, what do you call it? Two-sided. In other words, there's a kind of like a rocking horse type of nature to the political will in the United States, and I don't think any country is completely secure in terms of like how much the people will appreciate the acts of government. So I don't think there's an automatic relation. There's not an automatic safe space. Hegel thought it was in religion. Hegel thought that in Germany, because Christianity was so strong, that Germany would be able to rely on religion for its safe political space that would unite people in their political and moral will.
James, it's a very long 5 minutes.
I apologize for the 6th, 7th, 8th, or how many.
You'll be back. I know you'll be back. I just want to say a couple of things. Almost everything you said shows that there are no facts. If you tell me that facts are infinite, then I don't know what a fact could possibly be. A fact.
It's just like mathematics. You have to accept that there are infinities, the moral facts are infinite.
I don't have to accept that there are facts. I don't.
You don't have to. You don't have to be a mathematician either, Ron.
No, but I don't. No. That's not the point. If you
just don't want to count. I think you're being lazy. I don't think you want to count them.
Fair enough, but all my work has been on the fact that there are no facts, and you're telling me they're infinite facts, and I can't see how a fact can be infinite unless you say that everything you say is a fact.
In your philosophy, you're making the facts too important. The facts are the actual recorded occurrences of moral results.
And
in other words, somebody was killed, somebody was not killed, 20 people were killed, 1,000 people were killed, 2,000 people were not killed. These moral facts exist, objects exist as well.
They don't. Facts in history do not exist. No, they don't.
Well, you can have a philosophy without any objects, but it doesn't make sense.
No. History, if you tell me that history consists of facts, I would say, well, I can't even discuss that, because we know that the facts are made up by people there a long time ago. And how can I possibly call that a fact when somebody else will give me the exact opposite opinion of what supposedly happened? Those are not facts.
Well, there was a raid on the Bastille. I forget the year, but these things all happened regardless of whether or not you want to accept them as facts.
No, things do not happen unless you know about them.
Yes, and we know about these things.
Okay. Anyway,
could we perhaps agree to disagree? And because I'm curious about what Carrie has to say.
Can I just? Okay. Thank you very much, James. Kerry, do you mind? Does everybody mind if I choose a person who hasn't been here before? Is that all right with you, Kerry?
Absolutely.
That would be Linda. I'm moving you up. That okay?
Well, I've been to other ones, but not for a while. Anyways, this is a very interesting topic. I live in the United States. I've moved around. I'm now living in California and looking at the culture wars and trying to understand all that. Because I grew up in the 50s out east in a rural town, coal mining. So, and then I've read a lot about how the country was founded, the philosophy of law, the English Constitution, or the English history upon which I believe this country was founded. And I think that it was basically founded on the primary ingredient, or maybe morality, as freedom of the individual, freedom and individuality. And so I think that was an important. The other thing that was important was the government was supposed to be minimal. And the federal government in the United States was founded on the principles that of individual rights of the people. And then the states were supposed to, they had more leeway as to how they would maybe define morals for the state or for the people. And then the founding fathers, I read a lot of them about the Federalist Papers, and what they were relying on to make the Republic work was the morality of the individuals, of people themselves. But that was really supposed to come from civil society, not from government. The civil society included religion, but it could be, there was freedom of religion, so it could be various, and the states and local governments decided that. And that's how the country was supposed to get along. There were certain principles, certain objective, I'll call it objective morals, which is, you leave somebody else alone, and the individual rights that were of the Constitution. And that was I guess I'd call it the unifying factors. So the problem I'm seeing, I think that there is a lot now that's focusing more on the collective, on the government becoming more involved in the morality of the people, of collectivism, of equality. And equality and freedom don't really go together very well. But freedom does rely on the integrity and the virtue of individuals. But to me, that can only really be accomplished in interactions with other people. It cannot be imposed in teaching, in schools, and it shouldn't be. Neither should, so religion should not be imposed in the public schools. Neither should some of the things that are being imposed now, which is like critical race theory, DEI, they call it. And I just don't see that as working in the way this country was formed. So, so I'm a little skeptical of the general good, reading about the French Revolution. And that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Linda. Yeah, I'm also agree with you about the general good is a very a nice array of words. Really,
but who's general? Who's general good?
Exactly.
That's the question. Yeah.
Who's general,
and that's really
what is
that's
good.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
The communists said they had a certain general good.
Yep.
French said they had a certain general good. So.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Thanks.
Kerry, thank you for being a gentleman.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for hosting. And I wanted to shout out to Anton. Good to see you here. Okay, so initially, I think other people are on the same page. I'm less concerned with the formulation of any morality at first than I am with the status of the framework. And I mean, the first question I think is our moral framework, is it just a practical thing? Or is it, from divine origin? I mean, it seems to me that if there is some universal morality, we have a really hard time agreeing on what that is. So we're kind of left with a practical morality at best. And then the question is whether it's something that we're going to synthesize or whether it's going to be competitive, right? And what that comes down to is there some, if we're going to try to synthesize things, is there a minimum acceptable standard? How are we going to form consensus? And what does that mean for the people who don't accede to whatever the common conception is? And ultimately, is conflict inevitable? That's kind of where I think the rubber meets the road. Because at a certain level, if you have conviction and you don't agree, you're going to be left with conflict. And if you're going to be tolerant and say, well, we do things this way here, and we're going to let other people do things another way over there, that almost seems like what you're saying is we're just going to lack a conviction, and then what's the status of your morality? I mean, is it just something where we say, hey, we'll experiment with this and be touchy-feely about it? And then it's, how flexible do you allow it to be? So anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, very good points you made there. Definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Richard, good to see you here, as usual.
Just unmuting myself. Okay. First, when you were calling the bomber immoral, or bombers, I would say that maybe they were amoral because they didn't take our shared view of what they were doing. And I would really come back to what Mores stands for. It's the shared view of a society. and societies, there are so many different societies. If you look at ethology, if you look at animals, Konrad Lorenz did some investigation back in the 60s about aggression in animals. And I think you'll find that you can have close species that don't share the same ritualization. And so what may mean surrender to one animal means that you're offering your throat to me, I'm going to kill you. Now, if you look at morality as being shared, obviously these groups have a different shared view of it. To me, it always goes back to the group. One of the problems nowadays, which several people have sort of mentioned, is the fact that the Arab Spring showed this. You've got the Russians at the moment under Putin are showing it. The Americans with Trump are showing the same thing, that you've got people who don't like progressive values. Now, I would say that on the whole, the people who are called woke are actually morally correct usually. They're being kinder, they want a more open society, but that's because I believe in it. Whereas the people who look at it from either the right or left see that it's an atheistic view, it's one that allows free sexual expression of whatever the people want. It's one that says that people have got to have the right to decide for themselves. And this seems wrong both to the extreme right and the extreme left. And so you find that despite really brave students in Egypt and other places in the Arab world standing up and saying they wanted a less theocratic, a less dogmatic society, as soon as they managed to overthrow the dictators, they were pushed out by people who went back to a religious background. You see Putin now complaining about Western values and about, or not values, what he would say was Western immorality. You see Trump supporters complaining about the same thing. And all the time, the people they're picking on are the people in the middle, the ones I would call liberal progressives. But I happen to belong to that group. And really, it depends what group you belong to. To me, ethics is different, but I mean, I realize that different people would have different ideas about the difference between ethics and morality. But to me, ethics is something that people have argued about and tried to work out, not necessarily objectively, but to work out a system that stands for mankind rather than for their own social grouping. Okay, I think that's about 5 minutes, so I'll stop there.
Well done, Richard. Thank you very much. For a change, I almost agree with you. I did say almost.
That's good. We've been friends for a long time.
I know, but I did say almost, right? So don't let this get to your head. Okay. Thank you very much, Richard. Josh, before you start, are you walking? Good. You've got. I'll give you 6 minutes instead of 5.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you. I feel blessed.
Well, if I continue walking, I may nauseate too many people in the room. So, but I can't help it. All right, I'll try and stop. All right. Well, I have an unconventional view of morality, and I only found one person who agrees with me, the psychologist. But well, the first thing I want to say is that science is no more or less objective than morality, unlike what I think you, Ron, and others here seem to believe. Contrary to Hume, facts are not separate from values, and is not separable from oughts. And so in saying that, so far, I know I'm sounding like an anything goes radical relativist here, but I do believe that morality, like science, evolves, that it evolves by subsuming older ideas within it rather than rejecting older ways of thinking. Now, I think the fundamental key to understanding morality is people so far in this room are depicting it is that morality is driven by blame, and blame itself is grounded in the affectivity of anger. And by anger, I don't mean floored, irrational, flailing about. I mean, justice. The whole justice systems and the notion of justice is grounded in the affectivity of anger. And I'm thinking of anger in cognitive terms as an assessment. It's an assessment that somebody you care about or yourself have fallen short of your standards, have disappointed you, have created a rift in a relationship. And that's the beginning of anger. Anger then goes on because it's a complex affective assessment. It begins with that disappointment, but there are a lot of other affects that involve disappointment. I mean, depression, anxiety, or but what's fascinating about anger is that it is followed by the assessment that the person who disappointed you was close to behaving in the way that you thought that they would have, were supposed to behave. And often it's the way that they used to behave. So they let you down, but you feel that there's a tantalizing proximity between the way that they disappointed you and their previous behavior. And so the third rung of anger is the sense of hope that one can cajole or force the other back to the way one felt that they should have behaved. My favorite psychologist who agrees with me on this says that anger essentially is like pushing a round peg into a square peg into a round hole. You're trying to reverse time and frantically force their way of them to behave in the way that you initially assumed they would, because you have no way of understanding why they violated your expectations of them. So anger is it's essentially a question. So anger at the base of blame at the end of justice, at the base of justice, is a question. Why did the other act that way? Why did they act in a way that was capricious, that was arbitrary? And because there's no answer, all we have is our attempt to try and, give them a taste of their own medicine, try and get them to mend their ways, try and get them back. If you can't get them back to the way you thought that they should have behaved, then you can try some other way of at least, mitigating them. But there's this notion that there's because all of our behavior is potentially capricious, that all of us have the potential to be, to stray, to be tempted to wander away from the norms. But again, I think it's that anytime we feel that sense of anger, that sense of righteousness, that sense of indignation, it is always a failure on our part to understand the other person in such a way that we can see their behavior not only as justified from their own perspective, but justified in a way that we can subsume as a variation of our own perspective. By seeing it as, for example, if a dog acts a certain way, if we have no trouble and often and usually not being angry, or a small child or an adult acts a way, and then we find initially we react with anger, and then we discover, oh, there's a justification to their actions, or it was unintentional. But it's a notion of this waywardness. And our belief in the waywardness of the other comes from our sense that what motivates us is not something that can necessarily be correlated with what motivates others, that each of us can wander off in our own directions, or cultures can wander off from their own directions, and there's nothing that unifies motivation. So my way of looking at actions of others, for example, the bomber, how many in the room felt hostility, felt anger, felt annoyance, because we assumed, was it Richard who said that, okay, their actions weren't immoral, they were amoral, but that's still a kind of hostility involved there. It's blaming, maybe you could, rather than blaming the person, it may be blaming a certain sociopathy within them. So you're blaming a pathology, but it still resolves us of an understanding of the other person in such a way that we can justify their actions within our own system. But so in order to do that, we have to make a leap and assume something which is seems outrageous for most people to accept, which is that we all want the same thing in terms of our motivations. Our motivations are revolve around sense making, anticipating events in the world in ways that allow us to be able to make our way through situations without entering into chaos and confusion. And essentially, that way of looking at the world really argues that there's very little content to events. There's almost no content to the experiences in our world. It's all about the process of organizing that content. And we organize it in different ways. We organize it in terms of this and only this. We organize it in terms of, various permeable or impermeable ways of being able to relate different facets. And there's there's a historical development towards being able to get better at that. So the kind of injustices that take place and the polarizations that we find in the world are due to the fact that people are at different points in terms of their ability to be able to integrate other points of view, alien points of view, alien ways of looking at the world as variations within their own. But I've never met anybody whose point of view I felt was unjustified. I've never met anybody who was evil. I've never met anybody that was malicious. I've never, going through the annals of the worst atrocities in history, I've never encountered a single individual that I've read about, even the dreaded Hitler, whose actions were not only justified from their own perspective, but can be subsumed as a variation within my own perspective that were, in a sense, reflected a necessary kind of a development of history. So within history, so I'll wrap it up there by saying that, so what do you do about people that you recognize as having ways of looking at the world that from your perspective can be hurtful and harmful and violent, but that from their perspective, they're not there yet. They don't understand that. It's their best way of understanding the world. But you can't force your perspective on them. They'll never understand it. But what you can do is by effectively understanding their perspective from their point of view, you can meet with them at the cutting edge of their thinking. And if you're successful at doing that, they will embrace what you're offering them. They will delight in it. That's your test of whether you're successful or not, whether they will embrace what you're suggesting. And that will move them from where they are to where you are. It will only move them a tiny bit in the direction that they're already going. I know a lot of this just sounds absolutely horrifying to most people in this room, but maybe to somebody it might make a little bit of sense, but probably not. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Josh. But aren't you saying, in other words, what I said, that everybody has a point of view that we might not like, but we have to accept that they have a point of view, and we might hate that point of view, but it's there. But the
difference is you don't like it and I like it. You don't like it because you're not able to subsume it. You're not able to see it as a variation on your own point of view.
Well,
and for that reason, you don't like it. You just have to accept it, but you sort of grit your teeth. And you're not. Yeah.
If you're using psychology on me, it's not going to work.
No. I mean,
I don't think that there are certain people in the world. I'm sorry that I don't in any way agree in any way and will never agree.
I understand. No, I accept
that I accept they're there. But that's all I can do. I can't get closer to them. They don't want to get closer to me. I can close them. I don't care. I just have to accept they're there, and that allows me to continue to live. And by the way, you said something about we all want the same thing. I'm not sure about that. The only thing we might all want is to continue living, but not everybody. Okay. Not everybody believes that either. So I'm not sure. I have to. That's a very wide statement, Josh. But thank you very much. It's very, very interesting.
You're welcome.
Thank you, George. Do you mind if I bring in somebody who's never been here before? Is that all right with you?
Okay.
Before you? Yes. Is okay?
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, George. Thank you very much. Timothy, it's your first time here, so you can jump the gun and talk now if you feel like it.
Thank you very much. My interest was always in ethics more so than metaphysics, but it occurs to me that, especially lately, when I've had to think about metaphysics a little bit more, you really can't keep them separate. It's depending on the position you take in metaphysics. For example, if you come from a realism type of metaphysics where your thoughts and everything are caused directly through sort of not materialistic things, but basically caused by your environment and things that happen, that has very real implications on a moral theory. Because if there's a question about just how much free will someone has and you're skeptical about that, then that has implications on punishment. For example, is it just as legitimate to free someone from prison who did a war crime as it is who is completely innocent? Who's to say, based on if you go with Rawlsian theory where everybody, no one controls the circumstances under which they were born, and if there's just from their series of causation, then it's hard to say that one person is more deserving of having their wellness fostered than another. So you really have to think, especially when it comes to theories of justice, punishment. You have to think about that. Now, personally, I'm sort of a hypocrite. I find myself having to do hypocrisy because my intuitions, I lean towards a deterministic type of worldview in metaphysics, but it doesn't. But I still am very much interested in developing and discussing a theory of ethics, which is kind of like opposed to that. That's what you kind of have to put aside, your determinism thing to have it make sense to talk about, whether social realism, cultural realism makes more sense than virtue ethics and that sort of thing. And I just think that, we got a lot of great discussions and thoughts going on here, but, we ought to think about how things trace back to metaphysics too, and whether or not that impacts our, ideas in ethics.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Timothy. George, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Vaughn. Thank you. I'm going to start by making the point that it is the Nazi, it is the Zionist that says that there is no objective morality. It is the victimizer that claims that it is the powerful that determine morality. And so, in that mindset, the Holocaust is not objectively wrong. Indeed, different opinions on the morality of the Holocaust and the position that you're presenting, Ron, seems to me different positions, moral position on the Holocaust are all equally valid. It's just a question of personal choice. So I go to say that the Nazi, the Zionist, the Gaza genocide, right, is not morally wrong. It is simply a question of personal choice to determine whether or not something is immoral. Now, that's the politics question. That is the immediate justice question. Now, metaphysically, what I would submit is that humanity shares one mind, and we do speak along if you will, or we do speak with regards to a common moral ethical domain. And so as the world gets smaller and smaller, we see this reality, right? Indeed, one of the really interesting phenomenon that in my mind we've observed is when you see Netflix, again, as a kind of revolution in entertainment. What we see is that we can all engage in television shows from Korea, from all over the world, from the Arab world, etc. And we understand those narratives because we all speak the same moral and ethical language. Now, again, in terms of metaphysics, and this refers specifically to Hegel, is the idea that as humanity has matured over time, we've come to understand more and more the justice of the absolute, the justice of the collective mind. And so, what we're doing is ideally we will get there. We will achieve an idealized justice, or at least our institutions. And this is really the precise point that Hegel is making. Our institutions over time will reflect ideal justice. And so as technology advances, as the world becomes smaller and the universal is equal to the world, what we will achieve is an ideal justice. If we don't destroy ourselves first in the process, which is a really open question, and unfortunately, I think destroying ourselves right now is winning over making stride to the ideal justice. And that's also refers to Hegel, because what Hegel wrote about, he wrote about false infinities. He wrote about moral systems that are dominant, that are false moral systems, and that we are inauthentic in those false moral systems. Hence, this is why people go to war, right, to overcome those false moral systems. And so the idea being that institutions over time, I guess that I just thought that's the point of false infinity in the current epoch because of nuclear war, because of global warming. With regard to false infinities are going to collectively destroy us. And so we must overcome false affinities to engage true morality, true justice. And this is truly the only way forward for humanity. And so I'll conclude on the point that it is nonsensical to speak of moral relativism in the metaphysical sense. It is nonsensical because otherwise, humans are unintelligible. Language is, I would even submit, impossible if we did not have a shared mind with a shared morality and a shared ethic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. I must say I see very few signs of things getting better. If Hegel made any sense, we would notice that he was right. Things are getting better, but I can't see it. I mean, maybe you can. I can't.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
Look, for a long time in human history, it was the idea of owning another person was considered to be unproblematic. Then you have the American Revolution. All men are created equal. All of a sudden, slavery is deemed to be a moral wrong. You have the American Civil War, the defeat of the slavocracy. You see the mobilization, the global mobilization against Nazism. You see the civil rights movement. So to say that you're not seeing things get better, you're just being historically blind to that reality. We're closer.
Very possible. At the moment, the world is about to blow up.
Well, there's two different questions here. There's the rejection of morality. There's the rejection of justice. That's different than saying it doesn't exist, right? Our elites are conspiring against us. There's no doubt that that's true. But we recognize that they're conspiring against us. That's the fact. And that recognition is positive of the objectivity and indeed the universalism and the shared mind with regards to morality.
I can't see any shared minds at all outside of this 40-odd people here. If I go outside, I can't see any shared minds. I can see minds that are being unshared more than shared. I see the world moving towards a general war. I see slavery all over Africa. I can't see how you say slavery is gone. It hasn't. It's gone in our little world, but there's slavery all over the place. I can't see anything that Hegel said, but anything, sorry, I know where I'm at it again, anything that Hegel said that makes sense to me, because everybody translates Hegel in the way they want to, and for everybody who believes in Hegel, Hegel's God, and God cannot do wrong. And for that, Hegel for me means nothing, because for you, Hegel means everything. And we're back to an argument about Hegel, which is why I mention it every time, because I know we're going to have an argument about it. But I'm sorry, I don't get it. But that's just me. Perhaps my mind is too small to understand the breadth of Hegel. Sorry, I just don't get it. Sorry.
The problem is this.
I'm sorry.
Position, Ron.
No, that's it. No, I can't now. Later, you can come on again. I just want to tell you, it's possible my mind's too small to understand what you're saying. It's possible. I might need to accept that. So thank you very much. You can come on again later. Thank you very much. Iwio.
It's Hawere.
How
Hawere.
Hawere. Okay, good.
Literally how it's spelled, Ron. Come
on. Okay, good. Thank you.
I just want to say welcome to DLJ. Glad to have you in the room. Okay, so first of all, I only really clicked on to respond to your initial comments, Ron.
Excuse me. Do you have a camera or something? Can we see?
I don't have a camera at the moment.
Oh, okay. In that case, carry on.
I wanted to respond to your comments from your initial lecture when you were describing us, the populace, as a subjectivity who is also objective. And I found that fascinating. I think you've entered into a logical fallacy. We can't be objective if we're from a subjective perspective. We can make a metaphorical allusion to the objective. We can make assertions, we can describe it, we can annotate it, but we can't be objective and subjective at the same point. We have to be a feedback loop in terms of our own interpretation. And I found it very peculiar when you were trying to make the assertion. So I just wanted to say that, I'm quite happy to bow out and let others discuss.
Thank you very much. I need to answer that, because that's not what I said that subjective objectivity is. I didn't say we are both at the same time. I said that we can understand that others are objective, and that for themselves, each one of us is objective. We each have the greatest children, objectively speaking, this is the best, etc., etc., and we believe it 100% that we're objective, and they'll tell you, objectively speaking, my children are the best.
That's not true, though.
Well,
that's what I'm trying to convey. You can subjectively have the greatest grandchildren.
Correct.
Subjectively to you, that's your experience. How can I even question your subjective rationale?
No.
Objectively,
no. No. The point is, I know that you're subjective, but you know you're objective. That's all I want to say. I'm not being subjective. I'm being objective.
No, that's what I'm saying. I think you entered the fallacy in your belief that you're being objective. You're being subjective. Your experience of that
I know that
allows you to convey the opinion.
I agree.
I cannot offer you an objective insight. It's always going to be from my subjective perspective.
I agree. I never said anything else.
Okay.
But okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Debbie. At last, a feminine voice.
No, we've had Olga before.
No, she hasn't spoken.
No, Linda.
Linda, true. Sorry, Linda. I forgot. You're right. You're right. Sorry, Linda. I forgot. It's so long ago. It's yes.
Yeah, I wanted to address 2 points in relation to the objective morality. Is there such a thing of objective morality? And I was thinking of the first question, let's assume that we do not have an objective objective morality or objective morals. Are we all doom and gloom? I mean, would our world carry on as they are? Would we behave differently had we not had or believed in objective morals? And there's this experiment, well, a thought experiment about someone who is in the room on the couch, and imagine that there's nothing he needs to do, nothing we need to do. There's no obligation, there's nothing meaningful, or there's nothing there that we have to do. Would that person choose to stay in the room and just sit on the couch, or would that person go out, get up, try to pursue things and make himself happy and fulfill his desired, promoting things that he cares about? I think we would all agree that that person would get up, even though there's nothing there that he has to do or should do. So this actually is not such a thought experiment. It's actually a description of the state of affairs that we live in. So this experiment shows us that perhaps we can live in a society without objective morality. So perhaps we don't need moral imperatives or moral judgments to explain why we need to do what we need to do. And instead, perhaps there's a theory of reasons, a theory which explains that all the reasons of rationality simply amount to figuring out what we want. So it's not about morals. It's a bit taking from Hume's theory of morality that is actually based not on an imperative, but on feeling, on we have a sense, a feeling that something is wrong or something is immoral or right, but it's not an objective fact. It's not something we can actually grasp and give a good reason why this law or moral disposition is better than another. And what Hume notices is that our reason can bring us, it's instrumental to bring us to meaningful, to a meaningful life, to pursue our desires, to care for people. And he notices, as he did with his skepticism about causality and time and space, whether induction does exist, he does notice that luckily for us, most people do care for other people. Most people do care for their families, for their friends, for their animals. We are, after all, a product of socialization. We live in a society. We are social animals. So you've got Risto saying we are people of virtue. They need to decide. But perhaps we don't need all these people with the virtues. We kind of manage to live in a world, and we can, without explaining or asserting that this is morally objective. And the second point is to this theory is based also on the theory that we are humans, individuals, and sorry, as Ron claims, that we have our own perspective, our own surroundings, our own backgrounds, our own disposition. We can only act from my own deliberative and evaluative perspective. I cannot be a non-person. I cannot be outside of myself, as none of you can. And in that case, there is no real reason, as perhaps Hume would say, why my disposition is better than yours as a fact. So the theory of, I'll try and wrap it up. So the theory of the fact that we need some sort of objective morality to live our lives is not needed. I mean, evidently or descriptively, I think the world evolutionary has become a bit better. I mean, I don't know if you say better, but let's talk about if better is a moralistic term. So let's talk about taking care of people, of others, not only of ourselves, about others. So if in the beginning, people looked after themselves and then their family, their tribe, their nation, suddenly their race. And now we are kind of busy with all human race and maybe with all beings on the planet, people or things that can suffer. So there is, I want to see, some sort of evolutionary, progressive evolution without claiming this is the right way, but that societies flourish and it's better for us to live that way. It is a place, society like a democratic society is better or better for me, and I think for all of you, to live in a democracy than in a dictatorship. And I can give you really good reasons for that. They don't have to be moralistic. They can just be really good, convincing you that this is the way that you can pursue your desires, your wants, and to care for others. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Lots of interesting thoughts there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Debbie. Michael.
Okay, so many things. Yeah. Because so many people already spoke and addressed different issues of this. So on Linda points about her concerns about what is now called as woke culture or progressivism in the United States. And I understand her concerns about this. And what I see, unfortunately, that we used to relate the idea of progress, including moral progress, at least recently, to our liberal democratic culture, which is most closely associated with Western culture, although not universal, of course. And what we see now is increasingly the kind of united front or several different ideologies conspired against this liberal democratic culture. And it's difficult to make sense of this because these illiberal ideologies are so different from each other. And they range from this people concerned about social justice, which in America it's critical race theory and this woke culture, and so people who seem to be fighting for good cause, but this fight is based on illiberal ideas, categorizing people between different groups opposing each other. And on the right, we see someone like Trump and anti-immigrant movements in Europe, and Putin and terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah and so on. They all seem superficially so different from each other, but they all challenge our Western values, including our moral values. And this can create an impression of like our Western civilization is the fortress under siege. But if we accept this narrative, it also can become dangerous because it can create or reinforce this us versus them mentality that also can challenge our liberal roots. From this political standpoint, I also, Ron, agree with your, or at least I understand when you're saying that we are not making progress. So we did make progress, but now this progress is increasingly challenged and questioned. So this is one aspect of this. Another aspect is that regarding facts or regarding universality of morality, so in some sense, it's very difficult to agree on what are facts, but at the same time, we cannot have a meaningful conversation or meaningful discussions without accepting at least some common reference frame, what we all agree to consider as the evidence. Because if you don't agree on evidence, whether you call it facts or not, it's like comparing the data between different reference frames in physics without defining these reference frames, relating them to each other. So this cannot be done. Morality, whether humans are inherently bad or inherently good, it's a difficult question because the answer is probably both. And this depends not only on specific circumstances, but also from the point of view. So you can be good from one group and very bad for another group that you consider as the enemies. And this is going throughout the history, and this has its evolutionary roots in animal behavior. And we are still animals, so we still share the same instincts. But also, what is important to differentiate between the morality and the logic of peace and the logic of war, because they are very different. So when you have peace, it's reasonable to expect that human life has the highest value. So killing people or hurting people is immoral for whatever reason. But if someone resorts to violence, if someone starts the war and becomes the aggressor, then others have no choice as to fight back, because the logic of war is you are killed or you have to kill. So the war is a business of killing people. And all these talks about atrocities and so on, so that both sides always commit atrocities in the war, because this is what the war is. So the moral thing is not to start the war. But when the war is already ongoing, the best approximation to moral thing would be to defeat an aggressor, to punish the aggressor, and to prevent them from keep doing this. And this unfortunately requires killing people. And there is no way around this. Despite all these terrible tragedies and humanitarian problems with this, this is what you have to do when you're at war. And so it's important to differentiate these two different situations. And if you want to be moral, don't start wars. That's number one. So let me stop at this.
Thank you very much, Michael. Very interesting points. Thank you. Thank you. William, Bill.
So, Michael, there we are. As I've been listening to this, I came across an idea in my head that I really believe that morality is derivative of our values. Now, that's a not surprising idea. And those values, it seems to me, are variously represented in our stories about divine human relationships, about our accounts of our philosophical and other commitments. Our values are what give us the source of our morality, because the job of morality is to act in accordance with a set of principles. And we derive those principles from our values. And those values also give us doctrines, also give us rules, also give us a way of seeing the world that is moral, and ways the world is not moral. And so from my point of view, the idea, if we know the connection between our value and our morality, and morality doesn't go wild without any anchor, that the source of our morality being our values is something we all can talk about. We can all agree, and we can all talk about, if you're in this tribe, you got to believe this. If you're not in this tribe, you can believe that. But either way, the belief is the core of the moral choice. So I'm saying we carry the values that come out of our experience into really an implementation mode, that we carry our values in the form of principles, laws, rules into the societies we occupy. And so we have a connection between our values and how we act. And that is the important thing to recognize, that sometimes we may screw up, and sometimes we may not have the source right, or we may have the idea wrong. But the idea really is the consequences of our actions are what finally determine the ethics of our morality and its correctness. Consequences are the measure of our behavior. And if we forget that and overlook that, I think we're going to be continuing in trouble. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What's your base? Yeah, but that means that every society has different principles and rules, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And moral, specifically.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's an affirmation of your relativity.
Yes. Yeah, I can't see any way out of that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Olga.
Okay, hi guys. First, I have to leave after I talking. So I put my judgment on everyone and then leave. You see, I don't want to stay here. I don't want to listen your responses. But anyway, when you talk about something like morality, you have to put yourself at the position of judgment. You judged everyone and everything. And I would like to make, as usual, I usually give like examples from real life and try to put it from the heaven and philosophy to the earth. And so one of the first remarks was from Victor about genocide. Okay, let's talk about genocide. So what it's actually, it is in its essence. It's just removing someone's genetic information, destroying it, and propagating your genetic information. That's it, in essence. You're just removing it from your picture, and then you replicate and propagate your genetic information. So, of course, we could talk about something that goes in other countries, but I live in New York, I go outside and see what is going there. And I see there more and more homeless people. So these people actually experience something like social death. Nobody cares about them. Would it be some kind of soft genocide? we could say so. And I have to deal with it every time I go out to the street. I have to think about it. I have what I could do. I cannot do anything. Society just structured like this, and we have like already today I'm not sure that who, but probably Linda talked about individualism. That's probably in the United States, they solved this problem like this with mythology of the freedom. And this mythology was very convenient when people come here and they had to remove American Indian genetic information from their way. So yes, of course, everybody free, and I could not believe, I could believe, of course, but it was from woman. 100 years ago, we would not be even allowed in the group, allowed to talk in the group of male. But now I kind of allowed for some reason. So that's, of course, it's an example of like, maybe too strong example of relative morality. When you go to outside, look around. Maybe you see something that you judge somewhere in the different country. It's happening here every day. And if we talk about, for example, ecocide, right now a lot of people talk about ecocide, but every hour click, you see, every new computer, every new phone that produced from rare metals that right now, these rare metals, there are wars starting in Africa about these rare metals and mining there and destroying everything. And we're using it right now. So, and we have to have somehow forget about it, somehow to put it in our system that it's what we could do. What we could do, everybody, I cannot like don't use computer or I won't be able to survive. So I have to survive. So that's the like maybe I have more examples of these relative morality that we have to experience every day, every minute in our life, and more and more with social networks and everything. No, I'm sorry. So I put my judgment on everyone, and now I have to leave. I already at the door because I need to go to art fair to look at art. Don't look to homeless who just near this, just outside everywhere in New York. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was extremely interesting, Olga. Definitely made me think. Thank you. And now when you go away, we can all talk about you. Oh, she's gone. Thank you. Morris.
I have to already to go because I will be late. I'm sorry.
It's okay. We excuse you. See you next time. Thank you, Olga. Thank you. Morris.
Ron. When I got your invitation and I saw the title for this meeting, I started thinking about the subject, and I had all sorts of highfalutin ideas and things that I wanted to say, and I've written some of them down, and I'm ignoring them completely because I'm just going to speak on a very personal level, if that's all right with all the rest of you. And I speak on a personal level because I'm talking to you from a room in my house. The nearest Hamas terrorists reached was 5 kilometers from me at this moment. I am never at any time without a weapon. And I need this to protect myself and my family from people who intended and still intend to kill me. So when I hear, and to kill me because, and they say it this way, because I am a Jew, not because I'm an Israeli, but because I'm a Jew. Now, I heard Victor talking about genocide and all sorts of very moral attitudes and judgments. I'm sorry he's not here at this moment. I think he's no longer at the meeting. But it really got my goat, as we say, because for me, morality can start as long as I and my nearest and dearest can stay alive to think about it. When somebody is, even if somebody is a paranoid psychotic who is on a killing spree, or whether it's somebody who ideologically or religiously has decided that I and my family have to die, then for me, there is no morality. Morality ends at that point. It can start again when I feel safe. And for me, morality has ended. In my own particular part of the world, in this my own sphere. And until I can feel safe where I am, all the rest is just theoretical. I was too young to be involved in the Holocaust. I mean, I was born towards the end of the Second World War in Britain. But I know that other people, my family or family of other friends, were regarded as Untermenschen. That is to say, morality is for people, for human beings. But if you can classify some people as not human beings, as subhuman, then you don't have to apply morality, do you? And the very fact that there have been people in this world, and there still are people in this world who look at life that way, whether they're talking about me or they're talking about groups of people in other parts of the world, whether it's Red Indians like Olga was just talking about, or it doesn't matter where and who, then the first thing that any group or any individuals have to do is to protect themselves and to maintain their ability to live. After that, we can all be moral. I'm sorry, I have a lot of other things to say, but I am too I don't know, emotionally involved in this to go on. So I'm going to leave it there for the moment.
Yes, thank you for that. And you're right. I mean, morality stops when you're dead, basically. So does everything else. But okay. Thank you very much. Are you still here? Have you gone? Oh, you're still here. Good. DOJ, your turn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Morris. Also Jewish, bit of a different opinion. I probably prefer to be killed rather than to ever have to kill anybody, but who knows what I would do in any given situation. Okay, how to follow that? Sorry. Ron, first of all, nice self-portrait in the background. That's very attractive. Right, there's a lot of hands after me, so rather than talking for 30 minutes, Ron, with your permission, can I put a link into the talk I'm doing on Saturday on relating to morality, and then I'll shut up?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Do I have it? All right, in that case, I'll hand over to Frank. Thank you.
Is that it?
Hello. Yeah, there's a lot.
the waiting, and we're already out of time, right? So I'll keep that.
Yeah.
That'll do. I'll be talking about it next week, right, on Saturday. So.
Okay, thank you, DOJ. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, hi. A lot of great topics. My general inclination is to, give credit to people's ideas, to attribute who has the good ideas. There's so many good ideas here. I'm sorry, I'm gonna forget who had what. So let me just, talk about some of the things that I, struggle with, and that kind of comes down to the is versus ought discussion. And I really think that you can't separate the two, that is and ought, are dynamically related. That if you try to separate them, you get into this Cartesian dualism kind of, dead end. I think that there's, morality has been with the species since the beginning. That's the is, right? That as soon as there was a second person, as soon as there was a second entity, Homo sapien, that had to interact with another person, that's the beginning of morality, right? That's the is. Did they have a conception of, Christian morality or philosophical ethics? No, right? But the is of morality is how I get along with other people. As more folks, were created, the need for, the morality started to help people get along in groups. And interestingly, for about 1,000,000 years, groups were not able to get larger than like 100 individuals. I mean, literally for 1,000,000 years, we were stuck at being able to get along with a certain number of people, certain number of individuals, and and that just kept repeating. We couldn't get past that. The is at the time, the is of morality had more to do with how we interact with each other to gain our immediate goals, and to how we treat people who are interfering with our goals. That's the selfishness or versus the cooperation, right? Psychologists talk about the paradox of cooperation, not the paradox of competition. We're all basically trying to get our needs met, and that a lot of times means interacting with somebody else and getting something away from somebody else. So the paradox is, why do we cooperate? There are certain things that, biologically we developed in order to increase our ability to cooperate. I personally think that that's the psychological development of social learning, that led to our ability to learn from others and to start to develop these systems of the oughts, to create the religions, to create the philosophical thoughts that allow us to think, well, my is says I should kill you to get what you have because I want it more than I think you do. But what ought I to do? That there's a certain consequence to that. And, so that balance between is and ought, the more that we understand that and the more that we know that, I think that the more that we can delve into how it is that our nature impels us to do certain things. And should we go with that? Or should we do something different? The should, so that's, my 5 minutes, but that's what I'm struggling with. I think the more that we understand our innate drives, the more that the more that we'll be able to make good decisions about the oughts that we ought that will allow us to develop larger groups that will, allow us to live, better lives. Look, I'll just stop there.
Thank you very much, Frank. I'm wondering if you basically think that we are basically good, because what happens if you move on and find out that we're not basically good, basically evil? We're animals.
So we are animals. Good, I have a serious problem with absolutes like that.
Yeah.
Groups always want to band together to outcompete other groups. World War II came up, right? The Nazis banded together because they felt that the Aryan race was a pure, superior race, and they felt that that other races were contaminating the religion. So their sense of morality was, we want to sanctify our bloodline. I think Olga may have mentioned that. In their minds, they were good.
Yeah.
But what's wrong with sanctifying your bloodline, right? I mean, isn't that a high moral imperative?
Yeah.
Well, then you have to have some way of evaluating that activity in a larger context. Your immediate, is I want my group to survive at all costs. But is there another countervailing impulse that you can introduce that can put that in a larger context that says, just because I feel like this is the right thing to do, is there some other way to evaluate that, so that is there a better way to, not the good way to evaluate that, but is there a better way to evaluate that? I don't know if that answers your question, Ron.
Now, if you said that to the Nazis, would they agree with you? We can do it another way.
No, they did not agree that there was a better way.
Yeah.
It took a larger context. It took the Allies together to outcompete that strategy, right? This is the relativistic notion of cultural evolution, right? How cultures are varied.
Yeah, but the
I
Allies.
missed your question. Yeah.
No, sorry, but the Allies did it by bombing them to pieces.
Absolutely, right. That it ended up being a necessary step to achieve a better outcome. You hear about the kids today in arms about how the Israelis are bombing the Hamas, right? And they're not asking the question why, right? And if they are asking the question why, they're not asking, technology, Toyota has this 5 whys, why this, if that's true, why that, then what led to that why? Anybody who stops and thinks, it's terrible to bomb a hospital that has a bunch of sick people in there. Why are Israelis doing that? The answer is because Hamas has been using that as a command center to bomb the Israelis. Why, so why haven't we done that before? Because there's been this international condemnation of, going in and hurting people who are sick in hospitals. The same, in the Allies in World War II, they killed a lot of, Allies killed a lot of people because there was a competition there for one way of life that would have exterminated so many different, bloodlines, to Olga's point, that there was a better way than that. Why did the Israelis bomb the hospitals with the Hamas control center, war centers in the basement? Because that, I'm 100% sure that they felt bad about the people in the hospital who were sick, but at the same time, we have to know that they were complicit in supporting the people who were manning the control centers that were organizing the war against Israel. So you have to have these kinds of intermediate steps in order to achieve a larger objective. Don't you think?
Thank you very, very much, Frank. Very, very interesting indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Roland, you have unlimited patience.
Well, I don't know. I have to say, usually when I start talking at these meetings, I got some sort of train of thought that has some vague coherence to it. But this is such a, the ideas all still like floating around in the sky. They're kind of clouds, and I have found it very difficult in the sort of lead up to going, what shall I say, to actually anchor onto some particular thread. But I don't know. I suppose I might start with the idea of what are we actually talking about? You know, what is morality? I mean, if we're trying to reduce it to some kind of vague idea, I suppose it's about distinguishing between good and bad. I mean, we can go back to, you know, Genesis, can't we? And look at the Adam and Eve story, which is about the knowledge of good and evil. Forgive me if I jump around to different things, because one of the things that occurred to me was, I think it might have been where I first met you, Ron, back in the Richard Dawkins forum, but God knows how many years ago, on Facebook. And I remember watching these slanging matches between scientists and the religious people. I mean, really horrible things. And I started to wonder what it was that was fueling these vitriolic moral condemnations of each other. And I realized it was self-righteousness. It was people who had such dogmatic beliefs in their view of the world, they just couldn't entertain other points of view. Yeah, I think it's a dangerous thing saying that whether that is right and wrong, because that's the same problem. And I think Josh was on to something relevant here. He's espousing a viewpoint that's quite widely known in some circles, which is about forgiveness in some ways. It's about seeing how other people who have different opinions, how can you actually see that almost like as a detector for your own biases? And I think that's a very useful thing, but there's also another problem with it, which I think Morris brought out beautifully by brandishing his weapon, which is that although we are very adaptable people and we can say, okay, this behavior that's come up in this person is controversial, we could basically just stomp on them and say that they are to blame and they're immoral and so forth. Or we could try and understand a little bit more about it and see how that perception of immorality arises from our own viewpoints. We can do that up to a point. But then there is a point beyond that where we can't do it. We don't have the ability to adapt any more than we can, you know, try and persuade a cat to fly. And I think this gray boundary is possibly what morality is all about. It's about well, yeah, partly what it's about. The fringe beyond which we will not agree to adapt. We just go, that's not okay. And when we encounter that fringe, we have to either defend ourselves or die, or be harmed. As Michael pointed out earlier, you know, when you get to that point of you cannot adapt to this influence upon you, you have to do something about it, or you have to accept that your integrity will be destroyed or damaged. And so I think what Josh was talking about there is closely related to this dynamic of can can we actually use the controversial elements that people come up with that appear to be to differ from our own beliefs? Can we use them? Can we treat that as a valuable indicator of something that we haven't noticed in ourselves? Or is it just too far to go to do that? Are we simply dealing with an influence that is too antagonistic? There's the saying, isn't there? The tiger is not your friend. You know, it doesn't matter whether you try to, how much you try to make friends with it. At the end of the day, it wants to eat you. So, you know, there's no point in, you know, opening your door to that tiger, because it will just eat you. So, switching tact slightly, if I'm talking too long, Ron, just tell me to stop. I was thinking a few sessions ago, we had "Is the World Going to the Dogs?" And there was a point in that session where I got a bit freaked out, because I suddenly thought to myself, how many people in this room believe in heaven on earth, believe in this utopian future that we're all converging towards? Because I think that's awful. I think it is, it's so contrary to what we know about evolution and the probability that we will gradually increase in diversity. So the more we believe in the utopian future, the more likely we are to propagate division and to go in the opposite direction. So morality and ethics, I think, are like a sort of back door to self-righteous aggression. And if they're used in that way, the person I felt most aligned with in terms of what they said about how you can get over that was Debbie. Actually, I thought what Debbie said made a lot of sense. You know, can we operate in a society without all this horrible trappings of morality and ethics and oughts and shoulds, and still instead come down to things about what works and what doesn't work? You know, can't we separate the oughts and shoulds? And when people are divergent from what we think works and doesn't work, can we look at re-educating them rather than blaming them? Because blame, it seems to me, comes from another dogmatic position, which is about free will. And, you know, if we have free will, then we start having religion, because you can say, well, why didn't you do it differently? Why didn't you act differently? Well, you know, there we have a problem, because if we don't have free will, the person can't act differently. They need some kind of environment in which they are capable of being re-educated, in which their behavior can change. So I'm going to stop there, but I do think the whole area is utterly confused and mixed up and nuts.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I liked when you said that the move towards utopia will cause the exact opposite.
Yeah,
and I like that very much. It's
totally freaky.
We just don't realize that. We think we're going to heaven, and we're actually going to hell.
I think it is. It's a kind of, it's a religious relic. It's a relic of blind, what I would call blind faith that is different, that is detached from experience. You know, we can say this is good. Why? I mean, apologies for carrying on, but another thing that occurred to me was, if I say this is good or that is bad, then basically this is epistemological, isn't it? We're talking about knowledge here.
Yeah.
Well, most knowledge we want to go, well, how do you know that? How do you know that's good? How do you know that's bad? How do you know that that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade? Well, you conduct an experiment and how do we know that these absolutes that people try to present as morality and what is good and bad, how do we know that they're good or bad? How do we know what they will lead to? And how do we know what a good human civilization is? I mean, Yeah, I cannot get to it. I can't get to it. All I can see is things are evolving, and they will continue to evolve as far as I can see. And yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting,
Thanks.
Roland. Thank you. George.
Ron, you said something that was pure Hegel. You said, I see slavery persisting around the world. That's a purely Hegelian statement. Slavery as immoral. Slavery, indeed, the idea, the notion of slave as immoral is something that has evolved over time. So you've embraced the historic evolution of that concept and the moral evolution of that concept. Also, your critique was not of the notion of the immorality of slavery, which you fully embrace, a la Hegel. Your critique is institutional. You're saying institutions that failed us, hence slavery persists. So that is a pure Hegelian concept. Another point I would raise is that, and again, it's derived from your statement that we see slavery everywhere. So you didn't say slavery still persists in my house or in my neighborhood or in my country. You made a universal claim. And so indeed, morality and moral reasoning is universal. It is global. We globally condemn the genocide against Gaza. We globally condemn the Holocaust. Again, morality as manifestly objective and as well as manifestly universal. Now, the question that was raised toward the end of Roland's comment was, how do we know what is immoral? Now, one of the arguments that I make in terms of my literature is that one of the ways that we know about the morality and immorality of actions, situations, etc., is through popular culture. And I referenced popular culture earlier, right? So in other words, and I point to the reality of Nazi popular culture, Nazi cinema. And the Nazis wanted to naturalize, if you will, their unhinged values, right? I mean, there's a profound difference with what the Nazis thought and what the Germans thought broadly. I mean, the Nazis were clearly insane. The idea of purifying the blood, I mean, that's just sheer insanity. And so what's significant about the Nazi experience and their relationship to the broader German public is two things. First and foremost, they would put forward these wretched documentaries that they would put up in movie houses. And what they realized very quickly is that no one, these movie houses were running empty. No one wanted to see this garbage. So again, they wanted to naturalize their values through movies, through what you and I would recognize as cinema. And they were simply incapable of doing so. So if you watch Nazi movies, all of them, maybe with one small instance, it wouldn't be recognizable. There's nothing Nazi about these movies. They're just movies. Because they knew in the final instance that they could not put forward their values before the broader public, right? And even the way the media operates, for instance, look at Israel. What is the idea of trying to do? It's trying to destroy the social media. It's killing journalists in order to cover up the massive crimes in Gaza, because they know if people globally saw this, it would add to the momentum of condemnation of the genocide being committed against Gaza. The obvious effort at social cleansing, that is the Zionist project. This is what we see now. And so even the idea that the Israelis and the Zionist supporters are trying to say, oh, this is not a genocide. Why did they say that? Because they know that if the genocide
okay,
is going to be
that's it.
condemnation.
Sorry. That's the end of that discussion.
I'm not talking about morality, aren't
No,
we?
you're not.
Yes, I am talking about how the universalism of morality.
No. You're making political statement. I don't accept it. Sorry. Josh, your turn.
Yeah.
You're still walking. Good lad.
Yeah, still a beautiful day. I lived in Israel in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War, but it was a very different kind of a war. Israel proper was never really a threat, except occasional lobbing of missiles, mostly missed. In fact, it was so different that my father, who was a physician, was able to travel into Gaza, and he taught at one of the main hospitals there, and he was, embraced by the staff. He still has this beautiful photo Brooklyn nurses, we're so grateful. It shows you there was no Hamas existent then. But, I was thinking of Maurice's comment. It is never the case that morality is absent. It is always working in the background. If you have 10 people in a heinous situation in which they are fighting for their lives, those 10 people will probably all make the same decision. If they see someone who they think is putting the lives of themselves and their families at risk, and probably none of them probably will hesitate to shoot. Even though each of those 10 people later will tell you, well, we all have different moral positions. So it would seem on the surface to suggest that it's correct that the morality goes out, or the morality is moral positions are irrelevant in a situation like that. They're not irrelevant. It's simply that you don't have a chance to see their operation in the background, because it's a very, very immediate, concrete situation. Where you see the morality operating, the more different moral positions, is if you get past the emergency, and now you have to deal with a population that hates you, and you have to make decisions concerning what do we do, what kind of risk do we take when we're at the negotiating table, all those kinds of things. But so in that regard, I was thinking, Ron, about your question. So let's say, getting back to your formulation, that everybody has their own objective morality, but it is subjective to them. And what do you do about that? I was thinking of Ken Gergen's social constructionist position, where he says, and this relates both to what Debbie and Roland, I think, were pointing to, is that communities formulate their own moral positions on the basis of practices that are intelligible to them. And they end up, it's inevitable that they end up building a kind of a fortress around those positions, almost like a cult does, because outsiders' positions are unintelligible. And what's unintelligible to them is a threat, because they can't make any sense of it. They can't predict it. It becomes a harm. And so you get all these walled positions that call themselves moral, but different from each other. So what do we do about that? Well, the key is whether we can convince ourselves truly in the justification of those moral positions from the point of view of the individuals who are part of those communities, number one, but also that if you still find yourself finding their positions objectively abhorrent to you, then you are still wedded to a notion that the content of those positions is substantive enough that one has to make a decision about that substantive content. What is it that they're united around? What kind of ideology? What kind of position? What kind of practices? I think, from my perspective and the business perspective of social constructionists and various sort of post-structuralist thinkers, the content really is almost irrelevant. It's the fact that there will always be a set of practices that emerge within communities that become internally intelligible to those communities, and that and from which there's a barrier, there's a wall that's created. Simply the very thing that unites those individuals within themselves alienates themselves from an outside community. And Ken Gergen had developed ways of, let's say, you're taking individuals from one community and one from another, right? Or those from two opposing, political points of view or religious points of view, and you put them together. You don't start with, having them confront each other on the content of each other's beliefs. Rather, you can have each of them role play the other. Imagine you're the other person. Okay, as a way to find out what they do have in common, because there's at a superordinate level, there's always things that they discover that they can talk about, that they, which allows them to bypass the areas that are unintelligible to them about the other. And if you start with that, use that as a starting point, then you can come up with a way of being able to, without having to totally embrace positions of groups that you can't, that don't make sense to you, or that you find unpleasant or dangerous or whatever, but rather that you can get to a place where you don't find yourself where you can live with those other groups and find ways of working towards negotiating more and more intersections of agreement. right? Which would start by bypassing a lot of stuff. But there can't be a motivation to do that if there's such a deep-seated sense of disgust or hatred, or even if you say, I know from their point of view, they believe what they believe, but it's a non-starter, because you end up, even if you say, well, I'm simply going to ignore them. I'm going to live on my side of the country and they can live on theirs. At some point, you're going to encounter them or somebody like them or somebody in your family, and you'll have to interact with them. And then you end up having to reject them or act in some way, especially if you're in a situation maybe of power where you have to interact with them and you're in the position of making decisions. There's going to be trouble there, even if you don't want there to be. So I think that, I mean, imagine if communities, I mean, there's nothing you can do, for example, if you deal with the Nazis, you cannot, as Roland pointed out, you can't get to the point, probably, I mean, going back to that time and thinking about, the deep-seated ways of thinking among, those groups, you're not going to sit down with them. I mean, there was no opportunity to do that, right? Again, you're back in that concrete situation where you have to defend lives, right? So that doesn't mean you dispense with the moral issues. You simply are focusing on a very concrete aspect of the situation, which doesn't allow you to really make use of moral decision making. But if you imagine a world where people begin to really believe this about groups that are united around different values in them. That is to say, if you can get to a world where people really are able to be accepting and say, look, I may never get to the point where I really get why your practices are the way they are, but I intrinsically accept them, then you have a very powerful situation where you can have alliances and ways of functioning with each other, which are much more effective than what you're going to be able to do if you still have that deep-seated sense of disgust or resentment. I just wanted to say one more thing to Roland. The position that I was stating, my own position, doesn't involve forgiveness, because forgiveness implies blame. You don't forgive somebody until you've already blamed them. So it's already too late. You've already failed to understand their position effectively enough. If you find yourself in the position where you're waiting to forgive them because it starts out, they disappoint you, they violate your norms, you try and press them to apologize. They express, if you're successful, they express apologies. Oh, I'm sorry I did that. I shouldn't have. You forgive them. Well, you've never really dealt with why it is that their thinking ended up being askance from what you expected of them in the first place. So you really haven't gotten to the point that I was sort of aiming at, which it should never require forgiveness in the first place. Okay, I'll shut up.
Thank you, Josh. One of the biggest problems. I mean, your first question was, what do we do about it? And I got to the unfortunate situation where I have to say I don't know, because if I bring out things that are okay, I know what to do, then I've shot myself in the foot, because I just don't know. That's the point. That things are approximate, and that there's no objectivity, and there's no objective fact. I can't then say, well, this is what is going to happen, because then I'm saying, well, this is what's going to happen, and I'm stuck. And that's what I meant when I said in the beginning that for me, I dug myself into a hole because of my philosophical views that go against my moral views. Then it's not an easy position to be in. So I have to say I don't know.
If you were able to reduce your sense of disgust or abhorrence towards the other's position, then even if you can't expect them to be able to come forward and to do anything to ameliorate their difference from you, there are things that you can do unilaterally, which depend only on you rather than on them. Does that make any sense?
I would have to say yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, George. Okay. If you're going to continue what your thoughts of before, don't bother.
No, that's not my plan. Although I will kindly say I did not start it. In any event, what I wanted to ask you, I wanted to come back to the point, going back to my original point, and I was talking about the universalism of justice in every instance. And indeed, how people do conceptualize justice globally. Indeed, the very notion of global politics, right? Again, all men are, and it may be mentioned before, all men are created equal. You know, the American Revolution changed global politics. The American Civil War changed global politics. You know, so these things, you know, these events, these movements start off or take place in certain venues, but then they shape the world as a whole, politically speaking, institutionally speaking, which of course speaks to a global morality, invariably, and global conceptions of justice. But I want to go back to your point and simply ask you about your point that slavery persists, which is again is a Hegelian way of framing the world. And so I wanted to sort of press you on that.
The point is that Hegel is always right. And so I have no argument.
Well, but my point is, on the one hand, you deny, if I'm not mistaken, you say, well, morality is subjective, and you know, again, to try to flesh out your position, you're a little bit murky, actually, where you stand. You know, to flesh out your position is, well, everything is just relative to communities. In some places, slavery is going to be okay. In some places, it's not. And
For
those
them,
two
yeah,
positions
for
are
them,
morally the
yes.
same.
You cannot deny that for them it's okay, can you?
No, I can't deny it. Of course I can deny it.
Oh, well, in that case, nothing to talk about. Because
well, no, but wait a second.
No, because you're always right.
No, but wait, that's an empirical question, right? In other words, where we see slavery, we don't see democracy, right? We see dictatorship, we see authoritarianism, right? You know, so again, I think the issue in your mind is that you're having trouble differentiating and parsing out in your own mind. And again, it might be to the convenience of your argument, which is to say that some places, institutions create immorality. Now it's recognized as moral in those places. And so but that's why there's questions of repression, there's questions of killing in order to maintain that in place, right? And so it's not okay. It's not okay. So in other words, look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the. I'm sorry?
Not for you, no.
No, even for those people. So,
wait. For those people, it's not okay, and they're still doing it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, what can I say to that?
Yeah. So look, it's like this. It's like if you look at Saudi Arabia, Saudi has an interesting history insofar as that, right? The world changed around them in terms of family relations, in terms of the treatment of women, feminism, etc., and so forth. And so what did the Saudis do? They made a point of not saying, well, we're right, our position's better. You know what they did? They isolated the society, right? They limited that. Indeed, they had an interesting phenomenon. We had Western workers in Saudi Arabia, and they would have to be put in camps, basically very nice. They'd be ghettoized in a sense. I mean, this is subverting the idea of ghetto because there were very nice ghettos, but the Western women could drive in the ghetto, but they could not drive outside the ghetto, or they could only drive to certain routes to get to the malls, etc. So in other words, the Saudis know that their own society is not on board with this. And so if they had examples of women being free and that their oppressive structure would collapse. That was the politics that we saw. So in other words, why is there repression? Right? Why is Saudi an authoritarian society? If they really believe what they were doing was right, then they could have free elections and we all think this is right. But again, the very notion of repressive institutions speaks to the question of, and this is Hegelian, right? You're preventing people from being free in terms of doing what's right. Because that's what freedom is, the freedom to do what's right. And so, again, in your point of view, repression, authoritarianism makes no sense. Because if indeed people really did believe that what they were doing was right, there'd be no need for repression, there'd be no need for authoritarianism. But authoritarianism and repression is precisely to prevent people from doing what they know is right, in order to be free. And so again, we can't understand that concept in the way you're repression and authoritarianism in the way you're casting it.
Okay, thank you very much, George. Roland, you're back for another turn on the roundabout.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, another go around the ring. Yeah, there was just a couple of things that I thought I'd come back on that Josh mentioned. The first thing was about unity. He said, I have to paraphrase what he said. He was talking about tribal, what the cohesive force in tribal situations, and the idea that there was an organizational identity. I don't think he used those words, but that's how I've processed it in my head, which I think is absolutely right. That groups of people form identities, much as we individually have an identity. And the problem with identities, well, identities seem to me to carry advantages and disadvantages. The problem with an identity is that it instantly creates the, you could say, the shadow side of that identity, which is that you need to preserve it. And it is the preservation of that identity that makes identity a divisive thing. So the moment one creates a belief system about what is good or what is bad, one instantly creates the immorality aspect of it. So immorality actually rises from morality. They're two inseparable things, and we create those things when we create the moral code. So it's quite an interesting idea that the unification of organization in a group of people is what gives rise to the division from everything else. The other thing I wanted to comment on was the word forgiveness, which I possibly used in a slightly sloppy way, but I quite agree with you, Josh. The idea behind what I was talking about was the withdrawal of projection, which means, which implies the realization that there was no grievance in the first place, although there was a grievance because it was felt. So it's like to my mind, that's a change of behavior that then results in the perception of grievance vanishing. It's quite a complicated idea, I think, for this sort of subject. So yeah, I think those are the only 2 points I was going to make. So thanks.
Thank you, Roland. Michael.
Yeah, when I was listening to some comments, I came to realization that maybe it's besides the fact that if there is or there is not universal morality or universal justice, it's a very dangerous idea to assume that I know what this universal morality or universal justice is. Because this is a kind of assumption of absolute truth about a subject that is really complicated, controversial, understood differently by different people, and a lot of evil was probably resulted from these absolutist claims to knowing this universal morality. And this is, you can find religious examples like Inquisition, for instance, or you could find examples that had nothing to do with religion, like fascism and communism, as it was implemented, that really costs millions of lives. And so I guess my point that irrespective of philosophical or psychological or whatever other arguments for or against universal morality, it's better to be more humble about us, about ourselves, because once you assume that you know what is just, what is moral, your emotions run high when you see that your idea of this universal justice is violated, and you could do very evil things to other people. And especially this is related to this idea of justice. Because as many people have very different ideas about what is just. And wars start over the differences about these opinions. So just from practical standpoint, we have to be careful about this. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Michael. I agree that we all need to be more humble. I think if we say, I don't know, I don't think any harm will come to us to sometimes say, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and often this is better.
Yes.
This could be the best response. Yes.
Yes, I think so. Yes, I do. Anyway, so I think that we will end here, and I want to thank you very much for coming along and dealing with a very difficult and sometimes emotional point. We all believe we are moral. Each one of us, everybody believes they're moral. It's the thing, as Josh says, what about the others? What do we do with them, and how can we persuade them of something there? And it was I think it was Roland who talked about the fringe between, and I'm wondering what that could ever be, if we can ever see it, if we can ever see that line, which we'll never see. We just have to get there, and suddenly we're across the other side. We don't know where the line was, and how. That's always a problem. The line between something and something else. That's a huge problem that we once talked about years ago, and didn't come to any conclusion, obviously, because the line was somewhere. But anyway, thank you very, very much for a very, very interesting discussion, and let's all keep as moral as we can. And I wish you a very, very good day, night, or whatever the time is for you. And I look forward to seeing you next month. Be well, everybody, and keep happy.